Spoilers for the full show and the comic. The biggest difference between The Boys show and The Boys comic is not one plot twist, one character death, or one missing scene. The biggest difference is that the comic is a full attack on superhero comics, while the show became an attack on superhero culture, celebrity culture, politics, media, corporations, influencers, news channels, fandoms, and the way power markets itself. The comic by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson ran from 2006 to 2012 across 72 main issues, and it was written in a much more direct anti-superhero mood. It looked at characters who were basically twisted versions of Superman, Batman, the X-Men, the Avengers, and the Justice League, then asked what would happen if people like that were owned by corporations and protected by the government. The show kept that skeleton, but it changed the body. By the time the Prime Video version ended with its fifth season finale on May 20, 2026, it had become less about mocking comic book heroes specifically, and more about showing how a fake heroic image can be sold to the public until it becomes religion, politics, entertainment, and fascism all at once. On Wikipedia, that is why the show's VOD feels different from the comic's VOD American. In the comic, VOD is more openly tied to military contracts, government power, and the cold machinery of American empire. Soups are weapons, products, and liabilities. The company is not really trying to make Homelander lovable in the same endless, media-saturated way the show does. It is trying to own the board. In the show, Vought is still a corporation that sells superheroes as weapons, but it is also a movie studio, a news machine, a pharmaceutical empire, a theme park brand, a streaming content factory, and a political propaganda network. That change was necessary because the show came out in a world where superhero dominance was not just about comic books anymore. By 2019, superheroes were the biggest thing in Hollywood. They were trailers, cinematic universes, fan wars, convention panels, corporate announcements, hashtags, and culture war bait. So the show did not just parody Superman. It parodied the entire business that turns Superman into a product, then turns the product into identity. The boys themselves are also much weaker in the show, and that changes everything. In the comic, the team operates more like a black ops unit. They are backed by the CIA, they know the soup world deeply, and most of them are enhanced with Compound V, which means they can actually stand across from lower-level soups and survive the violence. Huey is injected early, and the comic quickly makes him part of a world where the anti-superhero team is also using superhero strength. In the show, that is delayed for years. For most of the series, Butcher, Huey, Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and Kimiko are not a clean superhero counter team. Kimiko has powers, but the rest are mostly humans trying to fight gods with blackmail, explosives, leaks, timing, desperation, and luck. Temp V only arrives later, and it is treated like a moral and physical poison, not a simple upgrade. That change makes the show more suspenseful. If the boys can just punch soups, the story becomes another superpowered war. If they cannot, every confrontation with Homelander, A-Train, Stormfront, Soldier Boy, or even Translucent has weight. The show turns weakness into structure. Hughie is one of the clearest examples. In the comic, he is Wee Huey, Scottish, visually modeled after Simon Pegg, and often more openly pathetic, comic, and passive. In the show, Simon Pegg is moved into the role of Huey's father, while Jack Quaid's Huey becomes an American everyman. Nervous, decent, angry, but still emotionally readable as the audience's way into the story. That sounds like a small change, but it matters. Comic Huey often feels like the innocent man trapped inside Garth Ennis' extremely cynical world. Show Huey becomes the moral test for the entire series. The ending proves that. The final conflict is not really can Butcher kill Homelander? The final conflict is, can Huey stop Butcher from becoming the thing he spent 5 seasons fighting? Kripke said the idea of Huey having to stop Butcher was built in the show from the pilot, and the finale follows that by having Huey kill Butcher to stop him from releasing the soup-killing virus. AW.com 2 Butcher is changed for the same reason. Comic Butcher is entertaining, funny, charismatic, and monstrous, but he is much closer to a final villain from the beginning. He hates soup so completely that at the end of the comic, where he turns on his own team and tries to wipe out everyone with Compound V in their blood, feels like the natural end of his ideology. The show keeps that destination, but it takes a longer and more emotional road to get there. Show Butcher is still brutal, manipulative, racist towards soups, and addicted to revenge, but the series gives him Becca alive, gives him Ryan as a living complication, gives him a promise to protect the child of the man he hates most, and gives him moments where he almost chooses something other than revenge. That does not soften him exactly. It makes his failure more concrete. He is not evil because the script says he is evil. He is evil because he keeps being offered exits and keeps walking back into the same fire. The Becca and Ryan change is probably the most important adaptation choice in the entire show. In the comic, Becca dies after giving birth to Homelander's child and Butcher kills the baby. It is a horrifying origin story that explains why Butcher becomes the man he becomes, but Becca herself is mostly trapped inside his motivation. In the show, Becca survives the first season reveal, raises Ryan in hiding, gets her own fear, agency, and relationship with her son, and then dies later in a way that leaves Butcher with a promise rather than only a wound. Kripke has explained that the show kept Becca alive partly to avoid the overused pattern of killing a woman just to motivate the male hero, and Ryan was kept alive because he embodied both the person Butcher loved most and the person Butcher hated most. Wikipedia 3 that one choice changes Homelander 2. Comic Homelander is dangerous, arrogant, and depraved, but the Black Noir twist eventually complicates his role in the worst crimes attached to his image. In the comic, Black Noir is secretly a clone of Homelander, created as a failsafe, and he commits atrocities while disguised as Homelander in order to push him over the edge. In the show, that twist is removed. Black Noir is not Homelander's clone. The original Noir is Irving, a damaged, silent Vought loyalist with a tragic history, and later the suit is filled by a replacement. This means show Homelander owns his evil. There is no clone reveal that lets the story say, actually, some of the worst things were someone else. When show Homelander lets the plane go down, murders people, threatens mass death, manipulates Ryan, and turns America into his personal stage, that is him. The show made that change because Anthony Starr's Homelander became too strong as the center of the series to undercut with a last-minute clone explanation. The comic twist is shocking, but the show needed accountability. Homelander had to be the monster, not the victim of a monster wearing his face. That is also why Homelander's death is different. In the comic, Black Noir kills Homelander, and then Butcher kills Black Noir with a crowbar. In the show, Kimiko strips Homelander of his powers in the Oval Office, and Butcher kills him directly while he is weak, terrified, and exposed. Kripke said the writers always knew Homelander's end would come down to Butcher taking him out for Becca, even though the exact setting and mechanics changed during writing. The concrete difference is simple. The comic makes Homelander's end part of the Black Noir conspiracy, while the show makes it the end of Butcher's personal revenge story. It is not cleaner morally, but it is cleaner dramatically. Butcher gets the thing he wanted, and it still does not save him. Wikipedia, the finale, also changes the comic's body count in a major way. In the comic, after Homelander is gone, Butcher's hatred does not stop. He murders Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and the female as part of his final plan, leaving Huey to stop him. The show refuses to go that far. Frenchie dies before the finale, but Mother's Milk, Kimiko, Huey, Annie, and Ryan survive, and the ending gives them actual lives after the war. Kripke told the Wrap that they did not want Butcher to murder all of the boys because Huey being the only survivor felt wrong for the television version, and because a long-running show creates a different kind of pact with viewers than a comic does. That is one of the most honest explanations for the show's changes. A comic can burn the whole house down in the final stretch and leave you with ashes. A 5-season television show, built around actors and audience attachment, usually has to be more careful with who it destroys and why. The Wrap 5 Starlight is another character the show improves by making her less of a symbol and more of a person. In the comic, Annie's story begins with the same basic idea. A good-hearted young superhero joins the Seven and discovers that the glamorous world is rotten. But the show gives her much more interior life. It lets her move from believer to whistleblower to public dissenter to member of the boys to someone trying to build an actual future with Huey. The show also makes her relationship with Vought more modern. She is not just trapped by superhero hierarchy. She is trapped by branding, image management, online harassment, political identity, and the pressure to turn morality into content. That change makes sense because the show is not just asking, what if the Justice League was evil? It is asking, what happens when a decent person becomes a brand inside a machine that eats decency? A-Train is also far more developed in the show. In both versions, he is connected to Robin's death, which is the event that pulls Huey into the story. But the show stretches A-Train past that function. He becomes a coward, a celebrity athlete, a Vought puppet, a man ashamed of his own compromises, and eventually someone who tries to do something good without fully becoming clean. That is a very television choice. In the comic, characters often exist to sharpen the satire. In the show, characters are more often forced to live with themselves between plot points. A Train cannot just be the speedster who killed Robin. He has to go home, face his brother, manage his public image, betray people, regret it, and still not magically become innocent. The show uses him to make guilt repetitive, not instant. Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and Kimiko are changed in the same direction. The comic versions are broader, stranger, and more exaggerated. The show makes them more emotionally grounded. Mother's Milk becomes a father and ex-husband whose war against Vought is constantly pulling him away from the normal family life he claims to want. Frenchie becomes less of a cartoonishly eccentric killer and more of a man haunted by the people he has hurt. Kimiko is not just a female as a silent weapon. She gets a name, a bond with Frenchie, trauma, choice, and eventually an ending outside the war. This is not just softness. It is a format change. Television needs characters who can carry scenes without explosions. The comic can hit you with grotesque momentum and keep moving. The show has to let people sit in rooms, argue, relapse, forgive, fail, and return. Stormfront is one of the smartest changes because it shows exactly how the adaptation updated the comic's politics. In the comic, Stormfront is a male Nazi soup and a blunt parody of fascist superhero imagery. In the show, Stormfront becomes a woman who understands memes, online radicalization, fan engagement, and rebranding. She does not enter the story looking like an old Nazi relic. She enters as a cool, rebellious, social media friendly truth teller, which is exactly how the show makes her dangerous. The point is concrete. The show understands that modern extremism often does not arrive wearing a uniform. It arrives as irony, live streams, anti corporate language, and just asking questions. The comic says fascism is inside the superhero myth. The show says fascism can sell itself as authenticity. Soldier Boy is another major example. In the comic, Soldier Boy is pathetic, cowardly, and mainly exists as a vicious Captain America parody. In the show, Soldier Boy becomes an older masculine idol, abusive, charming, violent, funny, washed up, and still dangerous. He is not noble, but he is not a joke in the same way. That change gives the show a stronger generational argument. Homelander is not an accident. He comes from something. Soldier Boy represents an older model of American myth. War stories, toughness, emotional cruelty, celebrity patriotism, and the idea that abuse is just discipline with better branding. Making him Homelander's father in the show is not just a soap opera twist. It turns the superhero problem into inheritance. The new monster comes from the old monster. Queen Maeve also gets a more emotionally useful role in the show. The comics Maeve is tragic and cynical, but the show gives her more space as someone broken by proximity to Homelander, trapped by Vought, and still capable of choosing one brave act when it matters. Her survival is another example of the show refusing to copy the comic's pure bleakness. In the comic, the satire often works by proving that the superhero world corrupts nearly everyone beyond repair. The show is more interested in whether damaged people can still make one decent choice. Maeve does not become a clean hero. A train does not become a clean hero. But the show repeatedly asks whether one act of courage still counts when it comes from someone compromised. The political ending is also different in emphasis. The comic is deeply cynical about government, corporations, and military power, but the show's final seasons push Homelander toward open authoritarian control of America. AP reported that Kripke described the final season, where Homelander essentially takes control of the United States, as being based on patterns of authoritarian creep and then becoming unsettlingly close to current events. That tells you why the show could not simply follow the comic's old structure. The show was being made in real time during a period where celebrity politics, cults of personality, conspiracy thinking, corporate media, and authoritarian language were constantly in the news, so the show leaned into that. Homelander stopped being only an evil Superman and became a public strongman who needed love, loyalty, and submission. AAP News 6, that is why the show's ending makes Homelander powerless before he dies. It is not just a fight mechanic, it is the final insult. In the comic, Homelander dies in a grotesque superhuman conspiracy. In the show, he is stripped down to a weak man who cannot fly, cannot dominate the room, and cannot survive without the power that made people worship him. Butcher killing him with a crowbar is brutal, but the real defeat happens before the crowbar. Homelander has to feel what every ordinary person feels around him: fear, limitation, and dependence on mercy. The show wanted the audience to see that the god was a product, and once the product stopped working, there was only a frightened man underneath. But the show does not let Butcher win cleanly either. This is where it stays closest to the comic's soul. Butcher gets Homelander. He gets revenge for Becca. He sees the monster reduced to meat, and then he still goes to Vought Tower to release the virus, because revenge was never really the cure. It was the language his hatred used. In the comic, Butcher's final plan is even more sweeping, and he kills his own friends to reach it. In the show, he does not murder the whole team, but he still reaches the same moral destination. If all soups might become Homelanders, then all soups have to die. Huey stopping him is the point. Not because Huey is stronger, but because Huey refuses to accept Butcher's logic. The comic and show both understand that Butcher is what happens when righteous anger loses the ability to make distinctions, so the adaptation is not faithful in the simple sense. It cuts, merges, softens, expands, and reverses. It removes the Black Noir clone twist. It keeps Becca and Ryan alive. It turns Vought into a modern media empire. It makes the boys less superpowered. It gives Annie, A-Train, Maeve, Kimiko, Frenchie, and Mother's Milk more emotional room. It changes Soldier Boy from a joke into a source of generational damage. It turns Stormfront into an internet-age fascist. It lets more people survive. But it remains faithful in the deeper sense. It keeps the idea that superheroes, if owned by corporations and worshipped by the public, would not save the world. They would become products, weapons, celebrities, and eventually political gods. And it keeps the most important ending. Homelander may be the monster everyone fears, but Butcher is the warning. The show's final argument is that hating monsters is not enough. If hatred becomes your whole identity, then even when you finally beat the monster, you still need someone like Huey standing in front of you, refusing to let you turn the whole world into revenge.